Welcome back. Well, we are going to do something off topic today because I had a request to look into and then explain this recent talk that's come out about a financial reset because of the economic difficulties that were presented by COVID-19 and the reference to a Bretton Woods moment. So, I think this is the sort of thing that should be of interest to all of us, even if we don't yet realize it, and it probably deserves an explanation. So, we're going to get into it when we come back. The 2020 Financial Reset. Let's start off with the fact that in a 25-minute video, all I can do on this subject is offer a general explanation and hit some of the high points so that at least we all have something of an idea of what is being discussed. So, when they talk about a Bretton Woods moment, what are they talking about? And we'll get into they in a minute. In 1944, World War II was still going on, and the Allied powers met in a place called Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, and had an economic summit. What they wanted to do was try to figure out how everyone would go forward economically in the face of massive war-related debt, and in light of the fact that, frankly, everybody knows the Second World War came out of our inability to cope properly with the massive debt from the First World War. So the First World War, when it ended, everybody pretty much just decided, let's lay the debt all on Germany. Germany's the aggressor. They're the bad guys. They can pay for this, which was unrealistic, to put it mildly. Germany really suffered as much as anyone in that war economically. And of course, they lost the war, so an argument could be made that they suffered a lot more than others. And they certainly did not have the resources to pay their own debts, never mind everybody else's. It was more punitive than realistic. And of course, 20 years later, we were right back at war again. And it was almost an inevitable conclusion to a 20-year period in which Germany was really thrown under the bus. There's no other way to put it. Now keep in mind, I'm not going to defend the Germans either in the First World War or the Second World War. Defending Hitler is not smart under any circumstances. Nevertheless, it was pretty clear to the Allied powers that we couldn't make the same mistake again, that somehow the economy had to be readjusted going forward in the post-war world. So they had the economic summit at Bretton Woods and decided that everybody's currency would be tied into the gold standard, and everybody's currency was in fact going to be devalued accordingly because no one really had enough gold to back their currency, not even the United States, and we had all the gold. So the United States, we were the big winner, not just of the war, but of Bretton Woods. Our currency was devalued by about 12%. Now, when I say that made us the big winner, that's because most of the European currencies were devalued from between 25 to 30%, and in South America, it was brutal, 89 to 99%. Some economies were virtually wiped out. And some countries we're still, well, are probably now still digging out of that mess. So this is what they mean when they say a Bretton Woods moment, that we all have to get together and revalue our economy. But it can't be a Bretton Woods moment in that we are no longer on the gold standard. Even the United States, even though we've still got all the gold, we are not on a gold standard. We haven't been since the 1970s. Most economies, virtually all economies, are working on fiat-based currency. Now, a fiat currency means the government prints out a bunch of paper and says this is what it's worth, and there is no commodity or resource to back it up. It's backed up by the strength, the stability, the good faith of the government. It's, paper money. That's what it is. Can we go back to the gold standard as in Bretton Woods? No, we really can't. We are past that point. We tried it, and within 30 years, we were moving away from that. So when someone says it's a Bretton Woods moment, well, hard for me to understand exactly what they mean by that, because Bretton Woods came out of a different world. The world of 1944 is not the world of 2020. Nevertheless, they're free to use whatever terminology they want. It's our job as their audience to try to sift through what that means. So let's talk about who they are. They is the International Monetary Fund. They're known as the IMF. And even though we know the IMF as the Impossible Mission Force, and I would say there is a joke in there somewhere, but it's way too easy for me to grab it. The person who is directing that IMF, the Jim Phelps of the International Monetary Fund, is someone named Kristalina Georgieva. So let's talk about who she is. Ms. Georgieva is a Marxist economist. Now, I don't say that lightly. She is from Bulgaria, and quite frankly, that alone sends up red flags for me. For two reasons. One, here you go, Casablanca.
We come from Bulgaria. Oh, things are very bad there, monsieur. The devil has the people by the throat.
Well, things in Bulgaria haven't changed all that much. Now, today, Bulgaria is the poorest country in the European Economic Union. So, we have a Marxist from a very poor country who is throwing this stuff out. So why do I say she's a Marxist? Just because she's from Bulgaria? No. She is a Marxist economist because her masters and doctorates came from the Karl Marx Higher Institute of Economics. I know you can't make this stuff up. So, what does she want? She wants a smarter, greener, fairer, those are her words, economic development. Well, the problem with this is when you ask a communist what does it mean to have a fair economic policy? Well, the classical definition of communism is from each according to his abilities, to each according to his needs. So it's sort of Robin Hood economics, steal from the rich, give to the poor. Capitalist economics is very different. Those who produce are considered to be entitled to the benefits of their production. Diametrically opposed. So, why would this be a problem? Well, first of all, the IMF mandate is to monitor global economic development by keeping track of economies. Wait a minute, I've got notes here. Lending to countries that have difficulty meeting their balance of payment and offering practical help to those member countries. That's their mandate. Deciding on greener and fairer and gender equality, that is not part of their mandate. Not at all. In fact, those are social issues. And it doesn't take a whole lot to see that you can have a country that would be considered perfectly acceptable and reasonable by virtually everyone in terms of their government that would not adhere to these definitions. And let me give you an example. Vatican City is a sovereign nation, 800 people there. No religious tolerance. You're either Catholic or you're gone. No equality for women. A woman is never going to be the Pope. No gay rights, because if you are a priest or a nun, you're not allowed to have sex with anybody. They don't care what your preference is. You're not doing it. The 800 people who live in Vatican City, the citizens of Vatican City, consider it their life's work and a blessing from God that they are allowed to do this. They do not feel their human rights are being violated. They are deliriously happy. And if you went in and tried to pull them out of Vatican City, they would be devastated. So we have to remember that in a global setting, our views, for example, we want equal rights for women and we want gay rights and we want this and that. We can't just randomly superimpose that view on everyone else out there, because it's not a one-size-fits-all world. So, Ms. Georgieva has a communist, a Marxist economic philosophy. That's how she was trained. She is a Marxist economist with degrees from the Karl Marx Institute, which is about as Marxist as you can get, throwing out ideas that clearly are outside of the scope of the mission of the IMF. And certainly one has to remember that the IMF's funding, and the funding is tied to the voting, is 25% from the two most capitalist countries in the world. 17% of the funding comes from the US, and more than 6%, well, it's more than 17% for us, and more than 6% from Japan. And I think when you total up the numbers, it's like 24 point something or other between the two. We are the most capitalist countries on the face of the earth, the US and Japan. So, is she going to be able to enforce her personal worldview on everybody else? Extremely unlikely. She may want a Bretton Woods moment in order to level the playing field economically, because that is, the communist goal, that everybody is equal financially. no matter how much you produce, all of your surplus goes off to people who are not producing as much. Everybody has the same. It's not the capitalist viewpoint, because in a capitalist country, the harder you work and the more productive you are, the more financial reward you take in. So, can she do it? I highly doubt it, because again, a quarter of the voting power is diehard capitalists. Now, keep in mind, the remainder of that 75% is European nations that are largely capitalist. Some of them are a little more socialist leaning than others. Still, she's got a hard crawl if what she is going to do is impose a Marxist economic picture on the world. And sooner or later, somebody is going to rein her in and say, this is not the IMF's province. The IMF's job is not to ensure, smarter, greener, fairer growth. It is to monitor the economics. It is to help nations that cannot meet their obligations by providing loans to them. It is not to set the world's economic agenda like this, and certainly not with changing criteria, because our social criteria changes all the time. I have seen equal rights for women emerge in my lifetime. I have seen equal rights for gays emerge in my lifetime. I have seen, green emerge in my lifetime. I have seen we're going into a new ice age. We are melting the polar ice caps. Now it's like climate change. I have seen these agendas change. Anyone my age has. So, is she biting off more than she can chew? In my opinion, yes. Can she reset the global economy? Does she have the power? No. The IMF can't do that. She can call for it all she wants to, just like you or I could. She may have a bigger platform. She certainly has the support of people like Prince Charles, who, by the way, they say has a personal fortune that is worth up to $400 million. Apparently, he owns the entire Duchy of Cornwall, like I own this shirt. A positively medieval concept, in my opinion. Nevertheless, I would suggest that if Prince Charles wants a fairer economy, he should probably sit down and look at reasonably, how much money he needs to live on, and give the other $398 million to poor people. And that's how he can create a fairer economy. I am unhappy about this because, one, we are still facing a pandemic. Yes, we've probably come through the worst of it in terms of lockdowns and economic halting that we had last spring. We seem to have moved away from that, thank goodness. But I don't like the idea that anyone is taking the pandemic and twisting it to use it as a soapbox for whatever their personal economic agendas are. Oh yeah, we had a pandemic. Let's reset all the world's economies because I'm a Marxist. I don't think so. That to me is fundamentally wrong. No other way for me to put it, just wrong, to exploit a pandemic in order to try to terrify an already terrified population into falling in line with economic policies that are not tested. The IMF in general has gotten itself into a lot of trouble in the past and probably will in the future. Their policies are inconsistent. They will do things. They got into trouble with the Greek bailout. They will do things like take IMF money and pay off private banking houses. That's what they did in Greece. The money that was supposed to resolve Greek debt, in fact, went from the IMF to the banking houses, the sort of modern version of the medieval Bardi. And they're not supposed to be existing to function as an insurance company for big European banking houses. That's what happened in the Greek bailout. They do other things that are extremely criticized. They will get involved in infrastructure projects that displace huge numbers of poor people. And when I say poor, I am not talking about American poor of, gee, we can't buy the second car and we might have to cut out cable TV. I am talking subsistence level farmers who would be relocated from the land on which they were barely able to eke out a living in order to make way for a new dam or something like this. The IMF comes under fire all the time. The experts say that they never learn from their mistakes. So would it be prudent for any of us to let the IMF decide what's going to happen to our money? Of course not. Do we have to tell our senators, congressmen, that, well, we don't want this? No, they know already. So I would say ultimately we have no real immediate danger of an economic reset. But for the sake of argument, let's suppose we do. If there is a global economic reset, we in the United States will probably make out better than anybody else, just as we did in Bretton Woods. Would we see some devaluation of our currency? Yes, we did in Bretton Woods. However, it would be, half the devaluation of the next luckiest economy. We would still come out on top. Why? Because we have the largest, most robust economy on the planet right now. Would our allies do well? Yes. Who would not? Ultimately, the same people who did not make out in Bretton Woods. The emerging economies, the economies of South America, the ones that never fully recovered from the Bretton Woods deal, the emerging economies of Africa, the emerging economies of Asia. China would make out okay too. I think they have a very strong, robust economy. Do we have anything concrete to worry about? No. I really do not believe that we do. And gee, I hope I'm right. The alternative is kind of scary. But I think it's important that we remember where this rhetoric is coming from. The rhetoric is coming from the head of the IMF, a Bulgarian Marxist economist. Do not make the mistake of thinking that because this woman, looks like an English housewife and she can present herself well and so on. Do not make the mistake of thinking that this is the voice of capitalism. It is not. I have no idea how good a Marxist economist she is. But what I can tell you is Marxist economics and capitalist economics are two very, very different things. Being good at one does not make you good at the other. And if I personally were to trust anyone with the structure of the world economics, it would not be the IMF. Their track record is just not good enough. All right, I will talk to you all later. Give me your feedback in the comments.